Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our weekly DFS live stream. This time, we're heading across the seas to Japan. We got the Zozo Championship. So I'm going to break down some of the last-second info that you need to go out there, make sure your lineups are all squared away, and hopefully to go out there and have yourself a week. We're hot off an outright winner in Tom Kim. Also, a few close calls in large field GPPs. This fall, frankly, the end of last year was extremely favorable towards us. So let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep this momentum that we have, going in our direction and have ourselves a weekend. So first off, say hi if you guys are getting in here to the stream. And also go ahead and let me know any questions that you have. We'll be going through the weather, some of the different course metrics that you might want to keep an eye on for DFS and for props. And then towards the end, a little bit of a look through the player pool and over there on the prop side to make sure that we're all squared away. So let's start it off with a look at the course, a look at the weather, and there's not that much that we have to touch on here because this is a no-cut event. We're not going to have like a wave edge to worry about here. But what we probably want to focus on is how difficult or easy we think this course is going to play. That's going to be really helpful later on, right, when we get into props. But I think from just a skill set standpoint, having an idea of whether this is going to play well over par, right, or well under par is probably important to know, right, because there are certain players that are really good at avoiding bogeys. There are more aggressive players, right, that thrive in easier scoring conditions. And at this golf course specifically, Accordia Golf Narashino, you've seen a wide variety of scoring. We've had years where it played over a stroke under par. We've had years where it's played over par over the 4 rounds. And a lot of that comes down to the weather. So I wanted to set the table there because the weather the first 2 days is going to be an X factor. It is going to impact play and the types of players that we see filling towards the top. So the first thing to notice are the wind strength, right? So the different models they have in Japan, I'm not sure which one is the most accurate, but every single model that we're looking at is calling for pretty decent winds tomorrow, like 20-mile-an-hour wind gusts, I'd say on average. But over here on Friday are calling for 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And now this is updated over the last few hours and gone worse and worse as time has gone on. But here at Narashino Country Club, which, by the way, if you're looking for this on windy.com, it's just Narashino Country Club. It's pretty easy to find. But you can see they have 20 to 25 mile an hour sustained winds on Friday and 40 to 45 mile an hour wind gusts. Now, you may say that's just one model, right? Well, let's look over here for the GFS model, right? We'll go through a few of them. They have tomorrow not as bad, but look at this on Friday, right? 30 to 35 mile an hour winds. The Icon model, same thing, like 30 to 40 mile an hour winds. This Medio Blue model, right? Same thing, like 30 to 40 mile an hour winds once again. Friday, they're going to get washed off the golf course. We've seen a few rounds over the years where this thing has played well over par, right? All of 2022, it played over par, including a 1 over par average there in round 3. Don't be surprised if on Friday we see this play 2.5 strokes over par. So even though it's a no-cut event, right, we're not going to have to worry about guys making the cut. Over the first 2 rounds, it's kind of going to be hold on, right, and just try and stay somewhere near like 3-4 under par. I don't see somebody getting out to like 10 to 12 under the first 2 rounds. Tomorrow you'll probably see somebody shoot like a 64, like maybe a 65 out there. But that player is very likely to give back strokes on Friday. So in terms of like impacting our player selection, right, maybe we're looking a little bit more at bogey avoidance than we would have been before because, under perfect conditions, this course isn't a bear, right? It's par 70. It's only like 7,000 yards. There are a few tough tee shots out there. There are 5 par 3s. So it really does play longer than the scorecard yardage because one of the holes out there, right, is an extra par 3. But at the same time, it's not a 7,800 yard golf course, right? It's not like 30, 40 mile an hour winds every single day out there. So Friday is going to look a little different, right, than some of the rounds that we saw especially last year, right? The scoring average last year was nearly a stroke under par, right? Played 0.85 under par. You can see 1 round last year played slightly over par. This year, it's going to be at least 2 of the 4 rounds. So with that being said, normally these no-cut events are a perfect time to go after high upside birdie makers. And I think especially for Showdown, that's what you want to focus on. So we'll talk a little bit about the main slate, right? That'll be our main focus here. But for Showdown, it's a little bit of a different thought process, right? I'd say especially for Saturday, Sunday, my favorite slates for Showdown this week are definitely going to be Saturday and Sunday if we get better wind conditions, because there are going to be guys down here. And I just want to give you a perfect example, like a Kevin Yu, that is going to be perfect for Saturday or Sunday Showdown, right? First off, Kevin Yu is probably going to bogey 1 trillion holes this week. That's kind of just what he does, but especially at hard off the tee golf courses, and he sucks in the wind. So that's just something that I've noticed over the past few months is he normally blows up when he gets any sort of wind out there. So Kevin Yu, I mean, I don't want to make this hot take now. He might be in last place through the first 2 rounds, but then over the weekend, when he's going off early, when there's going to be next to no wind, he could go out there and torch the place. So there are going to be players like that, like Kevin Yu, I think is a perfect example, that are much better for Showdown than they are for main slate. Now, Kevin Yu, for full transparency, is a player that I'm also taking for the main slate, but our thought process, right, for main slate versus Showdown should be a lot different, right? For main slate, placement points are going to matter, right? Especially if you think scoring conditions are going to be a little bit more difficult this year. Making sure you can get those top 5, those top 10 placement points are going to be how you actually take down GPPs. You know, when we have a scoring fest like we had last week, right, where JT posted, I know he finished pretty decently, ended up scoring 2 less points than your winner in Tom Kim. I mean, that's huge, right? There's a whole 10-point difference from first to second place, let alone the difference between Tom Kim's placement and then what you had with Poston last week. A lot of times at easy courses, the birdies outweigh the placement. I don't think that's going to be the case this week, right? That's why we have to treat the main slate a little bit differently than Showdown. Showdown, especially like for round 3 Showdown, I think that's where we're going to have the biggest edge this week. We don't have to worry about placement at all, right? We're just going after that birdie production. But over the 4-round sample size, that's why guys like Xander, right, fill towards the top of my model. It's why I'm betting him this week. It's why I'm going after Keegan Bradley, who's had such a great sample size around Accordia Golf Narashino. Both have been decent in the wind in the past 2, right? They're elite tier players. They know how to deal with those sort of conditions. But for the main slate, right, I'm going after some of these chalky pieces. Whereas for Showdown, like if I was playing round 1 Showdown tomorrow, I'd be taking all pivots up top. I mean, Ricky Fowler would probably be my number 1 Showdown play. Heck, even a Cam Davis and Adam Scott out there, right? I'd be going after some of these just high upside, lower owned golfers. Whereas for main slate, I'm a little bit safer about it. And I hate to say the word safe because there's nothing safe in PGA DFS, but like Hideki, right, with his course history, like I think he's a really good main slate play this week. So I think depending on what kind of contest that you're entering, right, depending on the kind of format of GPP that you're entering, whether it's Showdown or for main slate over a 4-round sample, you need to be attacking the slate a little bit differently. A few other things to note. I have the ownership on here, so we're going to talk about some of the chalky guys, some of the more pivots as we go through the player pool here. But anytime you have a limited field, right? In this case, a no-cut field kind of event with 78 players, ownership is going to be more condensed, right? That's why I thought Xander might be 30% plus owned this week. I've got him at 24.6% right now. So just know that some of the ownership numbers here are going to be higher, right? So just have that as a little bit of perspective. But even with that, the ownership's not out of hand on anyone. I mean, your lowest owned player up here in the 9K range is what? Adam Scott at 15.2%, and there's less than a 10% gap between him and your highest owned player in Xander, right? Your second highest owned player per my projections is a Hideki Matsuyama, right? With his incredible track record around here, also the hometown narrative, right? A lot of people are going to play Hideki this week. And just by the way, I've looked at a few other projection sources around the industry. Some of them don't have Hideki very high in terms of ownership, and I just think that's like a blatant mistake, right? Like people are going to play Hideki this week. So, even then, right, he's only 21.4% owned. I guess that's what I'm trying to point out is that he's only 6% higher owned than your lowest owned guy here up in the 9K range. Like that to me means you just play your guys, right? Like if there's going to be marginal differences in ownership with your guys here up top, you play your guys, right? You're a big Morikawa guy this week, play Colin Morikawa. You're a big Sanjay guy, so on and so forth, right? You play your guys this week. And for me, a lot of it comes down to bogey avoidance and a lot of it comes down to course history, right? That's how I made a lot of my picks towards the top of the board. Have your own process, right? Go out there, hone in on a few stats that you want to highlight in your player pool and attack it. And the reason why I say that, to have your own process, to go out there, attack correlation, is exactly for that, right? To try and correlate certain things. the reason why I'm going after guys with course history and bogey avoiders is that's very easy to correlate, right? I can find 3-4 guys towards the top of my player pool to build most of my lineups around, and that's essentially what I've done this week, right? Keegan Bradley, exceptional course history. Xander really checks both the boxes I'm looking for. Hideki Matsuyama, elite level course history. I'm playing Ricky this week, right? Elite level course history. That's the correlation I'm looking for, right? And maybe this is a course like Augusta, right? That we find, we've only seen this course 4 times before, by the way. Maybe in 5 to 10 years, we end up finding out that this is like the number 1 correlated course history course on tour. I mean, looking at some of the winners and some of the finishes, it's kind of looking like that, right? It might be like an Augusta National where guys are just really good at that golf course. If that's the case, I might be binking a lot of value, a lot of correlation by taking all these guys together. And I don't think that's going to be a common sentiment or a common narrative that people are running with. Let's catch up on chat. I know that was a long-winded little rant there, but wanted to get that table set before we hop into some of the plays. Tom says, how heavily am I weighing current form when assessing players? Seems like bums are playing great in the fall season. Yeah, there's a good reason for that, Tom. We haven't seen recent form, right? Recent form is really just BS, right? Because a lot of the sample, even over like a last 12-round sample, I mean, for Xander, that's last season, right? You're talking about like 6 to 8 weeks ago, right? For a lot of that sample size, there's a good reason that you see quote unquote bums winning, right? It's because their recent form isn't accurate, right? Like when we're in the middle of the PGA Tour season, like we're in like March, that kind of like maybe June, July part of the season, like recent form matters, right? I mean, heck, even the last 36 rounds matters because it's like the last month or so. It's not really that recent anymore. So I'd say that's why you're seeing that. And you should embrace that. That is always going to be a thing with fall swing DFS. And I would say a little bit less so now that we've had like 3-4 events, like, some of the field, I shouldn't say everyone, right? Because there are guys like Xander, right, who have pretty much not played, right, since the Ryder Cup. And then you have guys like Mackenzie Hughes, Cameron Champ that have legit sample sizes. It's hard to really compare them apples to apples, right? Because you want to look at recent form with the guys that have played, right, that actually have that sample size, but you're comparing them to like Xander, Hideki, a lot of these players that literally have not played, right? So it matters for some guys, and then for some guys, it means next to nothing, right? Like if you're looking at recent form as Xander, and that's why you're playing him, you're not doing the right thing. When we're talking about weather, are we saying round 1 has the 25 miles an hour? So round 2 is the one with the 25 mile an hour sustained winds. Round 1 has 25 mile an hour wind gusts. So I'll bring it back up for you, Tyler. I'll bring up the graphic for you. But yeah, Friday's the day with higher wind gusts. So I'll show you. So over here on this tab, on Thursday, it's closer to like 20 mile an hour wind gusts. And then over here on Friday is when it gets a little bit out of hand. So there's not going to be any sort of like wave to attack, right? This is a no-cut event, right? They're all teeing off within like 3.5 hours of each other. So you're not going to be able to go out there and like stack one portion of the player pool, but it's more so important just from the difficulty standpoint. I do think that this course might play as difficult as we've seen it here in 2023. So let me bring up my projections, and we've got a comment from Nick. Kid doing cheerleading in evenings. I finally get to catch a live stream. I love it, Nick. And hey, you got more important things to worry about. Being a good dad is as noble as it gets. So hats off to you. I'm sure you get to see him on replay, but we'd love to have you here in person, Nick. So good stuff. If you have any questions, Nick, any hot takes, I'd love to hear it. We miss your hot takes in here from time to time. Your Alex Noren takes, right? Speaking of, are you playing Noren this week? Because if you are, I got to take him out of my player pool, Nick. Me and you both know what happens when we play Noren together. It usually doesn't go very well. But if only one of us is taking Noren, normally it works out, right? So it's if you're playing him, I'll save you out there. I'll take him out of my pool. But a few things I want to point out here. I mean, we talked about some of the chalk up top. Honestly, guys, in my opinion, this isn't a week to like fade the chalk. Like I said that last week, right? And Aberg and Tom Kim nearly won the golf tournament. Now it's real easy to say that in hindsight, right? But like that's normally my thought process, right? Like if you have guys up top that you like, you play them. That's normally how I operate, right? From like $9,000 plus. But especially when your highest owned player, and I could be totally wrong about this, right? These are projections. I just want to make that fully transparent out there, right? If Xander comes in 24.6% owned, that's highway robbery, right? Like he should be 30% plus owned. And based on my projections, which I trust, and I go out there and I play my lineups based off of, that's where I have them, right? So a few other sources out there that I've looked at do have him closer to like 30. I think one of them even had him at like 35, 36% owned, which I could totally see happening in like higher dollar contests. Single entries, like smaller field stuff, like I'd expect to see Xander at 35%. It's just really tough for me to see him in GPPs at that kind of number. When you have Morikawa there, people are going to play Sanjay this week. Ricky Fowler and Hideki with their course history are going to get some attention. There's just not enough ownership to go around, right? Like you can't spend over $50,000, right? There's that hidden component to ownership that a lot of people forget about. The implied salary total, right? Some of these guys up here, and people are playing Morikawa. I've seen enough people with outrights on them this week. Same thing with like Sanjay and Ricky that I know they're going to be at least 15% owned, which is keeping Xander in check. And I really hope I'm right about that, because if I am, I'm going to have a ton of leverage on Xander Schauffele, and he should not be 9% higher owned than Adam Scott. That's ridiculous. And I think Adam Scott's a good play. I'm playing Adam Scott this week. So I don't want to like trash Adam Scott and be like, oh, he's only 10% higher owned than that guy. But it is ridiculous. Like Xander he's by far the best player in this field. In terms of chalk in this 8K range, I would try to avoid it at all costs. And there are a few guys that are getting some ownership. A lot of Eric Cole's ownership is from his projected points. He is the number one player in terms of points per dollar in my player pool this week. And a lot of that comes down to form, right? He's the number one recent form player in this field. If you take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, which for Eric Cole actually matters, right? Unlike some of the other guys in the field, like he's actually played this fall. His last 12 measured rounds are actually from the fall swing. And I mean, look at this. 1.3 strokes gained per round approach. Ridiculous. And then 1.3 strokes around the green per round. I mean, the around the green is probably not sustainable, but like the approach play 1.3 strokes per round, there's no one better. Like even Xander, right, who went absolutely off at the Tour Championship, went off during the end of the year in general last year, only gaining a stroke per round. 1.3, let's see, anyone else, 0.9 for Shank, that's pretty good. 0.8 for Callum Tran, 0.7 for Michael Kim, and then 1.3 strokes for Eric Cole. So I don't love the fact that he has jet lag, or he's coming over from America. He didn't play this last year. I don't think he qualified for this event last year. Let me double check. Yeah, didn't play this event last year. So it's his first time seeing the golf course. Probably hasn't played that much practice rounds, given that he's going to be so jet lagged. I still think he's a decent play. Like some people are just that good at golf, right? There are just some guys that are ballers out there on tour, right? That are legitimately better than almost everyone else out there. And I've been singing this tune about Eric Cole for a year now. We've been playing him at lower ownership numbers, lower price tags than we should have for like a year now. And nobody's caught on, right? Like there's been a few weeks in the fall swing where he's gotten some ownership, but not enough. So 15% owned. He is getting some ownership there. If you're going to play a piece of chalk this week, especially like outside of like the 9-10K range, make it somebody that's gaining 1.3 strokes per round on approach, right? Make it somebody that's actually going out there and balling the hell out, because Eric Cole's been doing that for a couple months at this point. Let's see, any questions about this top tier? She gets mad because you critique the elementary flag football game and miss your cheers. Hey, sports guys are always going to sports guys. Hey, flag football, you see they added that to the Olympics now? So yeah, apparently people are going to take flag football a little bit more seriously now. You agree about Ricky this week, especially knowing how windy, thanks to you. Who is a weaker opponent, Sanjay or Minwoo? So you're going to take Ricky against Sanjay or Minwoo. I would say Minwoo. So Minwoo, probably pretty good in the wind, right? Those DP World Tour guys, they've got the wind figured out, right? They've been playing over there for quite some time. And then Sanjay, he played pretty well at the Korean Games, was able to win a gold medal with Siwoo Kim out there to get exempt from the military service that both were about to get sent to. And, you know, he's got to be feeling really good about that. He's got to be feeling like freed up now that he doesn't have to worry about potentially going into the military for 2 years. So I would go with Minwoo as the opponent that you're going against. Right, Ricky, pretty good course fit. I think just the better player. I would imagine that the odds that you're getting are going to be a little bit worse against Minwoo, right? I mean, Sanjay's just a better player, but I would go that way for sure. And I got you, bro. Of course, Tyler. Let's go through some of this bottom end of the 8K. We'll talk about the 7K range too. Bottom end of the 8s are where I think some of the chalk is more egregious. Like, what are we doing with 15% ownership on Hostler? That's as close to donkey chalk as you're going to find, frankly. Adam Svensson here at 17, was it not 17% owned? 17% owned would be nuts. He's 13.7% owned. That's pretty egregious if you ask me. Adam Schenk, I actually think is a little bit more understandable because he's going out there, he's gaining a bunch of strokes on approach. But like, what are we doing with this Beau Hossler chalk? I seriously don't get it. If you take a look at his recent form, let's look at how he's getting it done, right? He's gaining 0.3 strokes on approach. That's pretty good for Beau Hossler, but it's 0.3 strokes per round. That's a stroke less per round than Eric Cole. Okay. And then he's doing it around the green with the putter. If he was like a 7K golfer, sure, he could probably be chalky, like 15 to 20% owned, but he's $8,500 in a field with some legit players in it. Like you're not talking about your average fall series event. Like we've got the Xanders, the Morikawas, the Sanjays that showed up to this event. This isn't the Shriners Children's Open, right? Where it's Tom Kim, Aberg, and everyone else. There are some legit names here, and Beau Hossler's $8,500, the chalkiest player in the 8K range, and not even hitting the ball well. Like, what are we doing? I seriously don't understand it. Like, if anyone knows somebody that's playing Hossler this week and has any sort of idea of why, I would love to hear it because I legitimately don't get it. I mean, let's look at the course history. What, he finished T16 last year in a no-cut event? Is that really why people are playing him? I don't know. I don't get it, so I'm not playing him, obviously, if you couldn't tell. Still like Tom Hoge here. He is a little bit chalky, but another player that's at least hitting it well, right? Has been playing during the fall swing. Down here towards the actual sevens, Cameron Champ is another piece of egregious chalk. I know he's only 10.8% owned, but compared to everyone else around him, right, he's significantly higher owned. And we're talking about Cameron Champ, who I know has actually been hitting the ball well. So if I'm going to follow my own role to a T, right, I guess you could play Cameron Champ because from tee to green, he's gaining in all three categories. But at least to me, right, the reason why I'm not playing him this week is it's Cameron Champ. I've seen this happen before, right? I've seen him go on like 2-3 week heaters and then miss 20 cuts in a row, right? This guy is volatile. He normally has a few weeks where the irons work and then falls off a cliff, right? We've seen it happen like 6 times at this point, right? So it's not like it's happened like once or twice and like now he's going to magically break through. We kind of know who Cameron Champ is. I think he's going to get better, right? He's still young, right? He's going to get better by the time he's like 30, 35. But I don't know if it's going to be drastically better. I wouldn't be counting on him just being an absolute world killer now. And he does have good course history. So, like, I don't want to trash the play too much. Like, he finished in 8th here. This finish 3 years ago was not at this golf course. So I've heard a few people this week citing that as a reason to play him. That was at Sherwood Country Club. So, yeah, that doesn't matter, right? But the 8th place finish last year does matter. So I see that argument. I see the form, but it's Cameron Champ. Like, we got to remind ourselves that, negative regression is a thing, right? Guys get into heaters. That's something that happens in golf. And especially when it's a volatile guy like Cameron Champ, that could all come crumbling down all too quick. Got to get a sip of my coffee here. My mouth's getting a little dry. What sport would I pick to win to avoid military service? Oh, boy. So, like, I probably couldn't do it in anything if we're being honest, right? But if I had to pick a sport and I had to, like, perfect it to go out there and win, it would be like curling or something, right? It'd be something where you can be unathletic, right? I'm not an athletic person by any means, but you could be skilled and get it done, right? So, like, curling, I don't know the specifics, never done it before, but maybe that. When I was younger, I was a really good skier. So maybe that, but like football, I always played, but I was never good. Same thing with baseball, always played, but I was never really that good. And golf, right? I'm no Sun Jam or Sibu Kim. So I would have to say like some obscure sport where there's like no competition, right? Like curling, where you can be like an overweight fuck and still go out there and succeed. Like there are some guys out there for the curling national teams that look like lumberjacks. They're like 300 pounds, right? Like if they can do it, I can sure as shit get that done. So it's darts for you. Yeah, cornhole. Yes, exactly like cornhole. I don't know if that's a official Asian game sport, but if it was, that'd be sick. Yeah, darts is a good one too. I'm not a good darts player, so I couldn't rep that, but that's exactly like it. Bocce ball for you. You slay the lawns. Yeah, I'm a big, I like playing bocce ball at the beach, so I'm sure it's probably technically a different game. But same idea, Tom. So I love that. Yeah, one of those kind of sports, right? You just perfect it. You practice it every day not to do military service. Frankly, I would probably just do the military service. It's only like 2 years. You don't actually get sent out to combat unless there's like a full-scale war. So I don't know if it'd be that bad. It's bad for the golfers that are PGA Tour golfers because they can't practice for like 2 years, right? They can play like once or twice a week out there on the base, but it's not the same kind of practice that they're used to, right? All right, let's talk about the 6K range. There are a few pieces of chalk, surprisingly, and one down here at the bottom end of the 6K range that I completely understand. So let's talk about Taiga Samikawa. First off, this kid is going to be pretty good someday. He's extremely young, extremely raw. He's only $6,100, and he's played in a few major championships. He's played in a few big-time field events, and you may remember him going out there and shooting like 8 under par one time. I think that was at like the Open Championship. He shot like a 7 under par at another major on a single round sample. And anytime we can guarantee one of these absolute, I don't even know the right word from me. I think he's just an absolute madman. I had another word I wanted to use, but let's keep it more G-rated out here. He's an absolute madman out there, and if we can guarantee he's going to play all 4 rounds, if he goes out there, that price tag, and makes like 20 birdies on the week, that might be enough for large field GPPs. So I like the price tag. I like his upside, but Kita Nakajima is another one. Now he's more expensive, right? Nakajima is $6,800. We're asking a little bit more out of Kita to actually get there. But he's also a little bit more established in terms of his play. So I like him as a potential Japanese flyer. But my favorite is Taiga Samikawa, who some of the announcers were calling Tiger Samikawa, right? Because he was actually named after Tiger Woods, believe it or not. That's how young the kid is. That he was named after Tiger Woods, and he's out here playing on tour with these guys out there. And the thing with Samikawa that, a lot of these Japanese guys, you could just like play randomly, take in a few lineups. The reason I actually like Samikawa is the guy has shown it on a big time field before, right? Like he's actually played in big time events. And speaking of, I'm going to just look up in my database when he played, because I think it was the Open Championship. I just want to double confirm that, make sure we're on the same idea. So let me do some digging for you guys. And while we do that, I'll look at some of your questions down in chat too. So let's see what we got. What's going on, Eric? You got the goat whale you going on down there? Okay. Let's see. Let's find Taiga Samikawa. He's an absolute stud. I probably Zozo Championship field. There he is. Yeah, so it was the Open Championship where he had a pretty good round. He played the Farmers Insurance Open last year, made the cut. Really good field, right? Sony Open went out there, made the cut last year. And outside of that, has not played much professional golf. So he's 2 for 3 on making cuts, and then has had some ceiling performances mixed in. That's what I like to see, right? And he's essentially unowned this week. Seems like a pretty decent flyer if you ask me. In terms of other guys in the 6K range, you have some mispriced golfers like Kevin Yu that I think bring a lot of birdie upside to the table. KH Lee is probably mispriced. That's why he's getting some attention at his price tag. Nakajima is actually getting some ownership too. It's worth noting that I like him this week, but he is also a little bit chalky. It's because I believe his track record at this event and some of the other fall series events last year was pretty good. So just to give you an idea, last year finished in 12th, but outside of this event is what I want to look at now. So let me bring up my finishes, because I believe he also top 10 at like the week after this event last year. Let me double check on that for you guys. So we're looking for Kita this time. I should just go to the OWGR site. It's probably easier than going through this. So he's coming off a month ago, he finished in 3rd in an Asian Tour event. That's pretty sweet. But at this event last year, he finished in 12th, and then he finished in 54th place. So I have to go back and look at it round by round. I don't have the round by round breakdown on here, at least on this website. I have a feeling he like completely melted down on Sunday, because I remember Nakajima in one of those fall series events, like being in contention through the first 2 rounds, like maybe even up there in the top 5. The kid's legit. The kid's got long-term pedigree, and I'm definitely taking a chance on him this week. Outside of that, though, guys, it's your normal PGA DFS slate, right? If you're going to play a chalky piece like a Xander, if you're going to play a chalky Keegan Bradley this week, you need to be mixing in lower-owned plays, right? You got to have some sort of leverage in your lineup. So a lot of people out there, right, will, talk about, players like Xander, Keegan, right, say that you can't play them. And that's just not true, right? As long as you're not taking them together, I think you're perfectly fine this week. And even if you do take them together, right? Let's say you started Xander, then went Keegan Bradley as your second man in. All you have to do is take one or two pivots here in the 8 and 7K range, and you're fine, right? Your product ownership's low enough. You're going to be perfectly fine, even in the largest field contest. And you would be fine even in like NFL DFS. Like, heck, over there for like NBA DFS, you'd be fine just taking a few pieces of leverage. In golf DFS, it's even easier to get leverage. It's even easier to get, difference to the field, not duplicate yourselves when there's 78 players to choose from, right? Like for NFL DFS, a showdown slate, there's like 28 players to choose from. For NBA DFS, a showdown slate, there's like 12 players that you can realistically choose from. We have 78 here. So we don't have to be nearly as different, right, as we would be for some of the other types of DFS. I think that's something that people that play PGA DFS, especially that like play other sports, that like play, NBA, play NFL DFS, just don't understand. Is that golf DFS, you don't have to be as different, like by default, just because there are so many different players that you can choose from, because there are so many different guys that are sub 5% owned. It literally doesn't matter ownership up top. Like, that's why I say, like, if you're going to take chalk, take it up there in the 9 and 10K range, because you're going to have a billion options down here in the 7Ks to get different, right? And let's say you start a little bit more different up top. Like maybe you start like Ricky Fowler, right? I mean, he's still 17% owned. I mean, let's say you start Adam Scott, Ricky Fowler, right? A 17% owned guy and a 15% owned guy. What is that? That's like 32% combined ownership as opposed to 44, 45% combined ownership between Keegan Bradley and a Xander Schauffele. Like, I know that kind of matters, but it doesn't matter that much. It really doesn't, right? Like, even if you went full contrarian up top, right? That's like a 10% difference in ownership. Like, that's why I think people in DFS, especially like for golf DFS, kind of like galaxy brain themselves out of making good lineups. Like they think they have to do so much to get different. I mean, really all it takes is like one or two players to accomplish that. So that's what we're going to leave you for the DFS side. Now let's take a look at some props. So I'll go ahead, bring up Underdog. We'll look at Prize Picks here in a bit too. But this is going to be a tough week for props. This is a golf course that is hard to get a read on, but we'll do our best here. We'll go through a few props that I do see some value on. And especially for rounds 2 through 4 is where I think we'll make most of our money on the prop side. So what are my thoughts on Morikawa this week? You feel like a lot of dog legs are left, which will make it fade only uncomfortable. Is it crazy to take Hideki to beat him for the tournament? I don't think it's crazy to take him to beat him, especially because Hideki has the course history here. And I haven't looked at a lot of the course setup. I didn't do a course breakdown this year, so it isn't really fresh in my memory. But yeah, if there are a lot of dog legs from right to left, that would be uncomfortable for Colin Morikawa. So I'm going to assume that you're spot on with that, right? You probably checked it, a little bit sooner than I have. If you have, let's say, like 8 or 9 of the holes that are doglegging in that direction, that's probably a good reason that Hideki's played well here. Also, probably why Keegan Bradley has played well here. Keegan's able to move it both directions, right, with a draw and a fade. So that's not that surprising to me, actually. So yeah, good stuff, man. And by the way, that's a perfect way to go out there and generate an edge, right? Like if if one course is really good for a fade and one course is really good for a draw, right? Favor those kind of players, especially when it's in a matchup. Right, when you have one guy that can move it both directions and then one guy that's one-dimensional, that's huge. That's a huge edge to take advantage of. Cage Lee is only high priced at TPC courses. Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. And I think he's got a sneaky good fit this week. In fact, let me look at his course history. I think he played pretty decently here last year too, if memory serves me correctly. So let's see. Yeah, he finished 59th last year. Okay, not that great, but he did finish 18th the year before that. So maybe not the best course history. Maybe I was a little bit wrong about that, but hey, decent enough, right? Let's see. So in terms of props, guys, a few other things I'm going to touch on here. So if I think it's going to be a little bit harder this year than we've seen in the last few, right, we're probably going to look at fades mostly. And there have been quite a few bumps to this point, but this hasn't been bumped, and I believe Norn hasn't been bumped. So if you're going to enter anything as of right now, I have 5 props in on Underdog. these two would probably be your best bets. Alex Noren is over at 69.5 on Prize Picks. He's also at the same number on Sportsbooks. And then Sahith Theegala, he doesn't have a bogey line over there on Prize Picks, but his strokes line is 1 under par. He's at 69 strokes, and his birdie line is at 4, right? So he's got 4 birdies, and he's only projected to shoot -1. Well, that means he's going to make, at least per their projections, right, 3 bogeys per round, which is an entire bogey advantage compared to what we have here. And then an entire stroke advantage, right, compared to the Alex Noren line. So if you're following that narrative that you think it's going to be a little bit more windy for round 1, which is what I see, right, per the projections, then these two are pretty solid fades to take. So that's what I went over there on Underdog. And let's bring up Prize Picks, where I think if you wanted to take some unders, you can actually do that for strokes. So Prize Picks projected a little bit differently. They have their birdie props a little bit lower, and then their strokes props a little bit higher than what you have over there on Underdog. So this is where you could potentially take like an under on Tom Hoagie. This is where, like, if you wanted to take the other side of Noren and try to like kind of middle it. Normally I wait for like 1.5 stroke discrepancies to go for a middle, but even with a stroke discrepancy, you technically still could go with it, right? If he shoots 69 tomorrow, which is very likely, right? He'd hit both props for you, right? He'd go under 69.5. He'd go over the 68.5 line there. And I would say out of his outcomes, -1 is by far the most likely outcome for Alex Noren. So Prize Picks, I don't have much exposure in as of right now. In fact, they're actively trying to ban my account over there. So I've been dealing with some issues. But yeah, if I was going to take anything on that side, it would probably be those two unders. They're decent props. They're better pricing, right, compared to the Underdog board. It's just that the Underdog board is like ridiculously like too low, like for strokes. Like you shouldn't have guys at 1.5 under par when the scoring average might be over par, right? And you have, it's like guys like Hostler too. Like if you wanted to fade Hostler instead of Noren, like you could do that too. Both of those guys are at 69.5 on Sportsbooks. They're also at 69.5 on Prize Picks, which I think is a lot more accurate, right? Like and at 69.5, like Bo Hostler, I might not even take an under on, right? Like he's not a very good player, right? Not trying to talk too much shit, but he's really not that good of a player. Outside of that, though, that's all I've got for props. Like I said, rounds 2 through 4 are going to be a lot better for props than what we have here for round 1. We'll get a sample size after Thursday. We'll have a much better idea of weather conditions, over the next few days as well. So keep an eye out for that on Patreon. I will be doing some sort of content over the weekend here. So last week I wasn't able to do live streams because of when the freaking tournament was ending. I'm always forgetting about the time zones, the fact that when we're playing on the West Coast, that the round is ending at like 10 p.m., right? We're not getting tee times until like 11 p.m. Eastern time. Makes it a little tough to do live streams when I have to go live at midnight, right? First off, the energy levels aren't there, but also no one's going to watch at midnight, right? Everyone's freaking sleeping at midnight Eastern time. So because the rounds will be ending at like 2-3 a.m. and they won't be starting until like 7 p.m., I'll be able to do live streams for rounds 2 through 4, right? It'll be in the middle of the day, probably right around the same time, like 3 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be able to talk about the weather, go through props, all that sort of fun stuff, which is a nice change from these damn, West Coast events. When it's like the Farmers Insurance Open, I'll normally like tough it out, but like when it's a fall series event, we'd have to be live streaming at midnight. It's not my cup of tea. Let's just say that much. So look forward to those this weekend and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of them. And let's go out there and win some GPPs. I hope to see a few of your names towards the top of those contests. And I got a few lineups to make here. I've got 3 hours to go out there, get my lineups done. Hopefully we can do so. Remember, guys, and yeah, I wanted to remind you, like for the 4th time, lock is in like 3 hours. Okay. So do not forget to set your lineups. If you're watching this on replay, you have even less time to build your lineups. So don't be that guy. It happens every single time that we have an early lock. Don't be the guy that forgets to set your lineups. That is the worst thing and only thing you can't do this week. You can play all the chalk you want to in lineups if you want to. You can fade all the chalk you want to in lineups. I don't care, right? Build your own lineups, but set your lineups in time, okay? That's the one thing you better do for me out there. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate the support here on the channel, and I'll catch you guys for the showdown streams throughout the weekend.